Welcome to the 2024 Banyan 3 of the Americas Music Evolution in the African Diaspora Symposium. My name is Eunice Mercado Rodriguez, and I am a board member as well as a performer in the Semilla Cultural Group. And we are extremely excited and thankful to have everyone here today, those that will be soon joining us on our streaming live as well. Today's event wouldn't have been possible without the support of the Fredericksburg Arts Commission, the Virginia Commission of the Arts, the Mid-Atlantic Arts, as well as the Dominion Energy. We also want to thank our partners, the Fredericksburg Area Museum and CLAVES UNIDOS. Please join me in a quick applause for them. It's always amazing to know that we can always count on our partners to be able to make these events possible. Before we move on, I'd like to go over a couple of housekeeping items. This morning's session, as I already mentioned, is going to be live streamed in Facebook, so you'll be able to watch the recording later. If you're having an amazing time, which I know you will, and you decide to make a post on Facebook or your social media, make sure you tag us in Semilla Cultural at Semilla Cultural, because we want to see it from your perspective. We want to see your thoughts. The restrooms, if anybody needs them, are located to my left, so to your right. They're going to be over there. And so if you look in the back, the Fredericksburg Area Museum has an information table for you to stop by and learn about them, their mission, and events that they have coming up. And in addition to that, in the back, Semilla Cultural also has a table. And if you want to help us continue making these events, we will have snacks, water, as well as other merchandise for sale to help us keep raising funds to keep these events going. Now, we wanted to start today quickly by acknowledging that we are standing on the indigenous lands of the Potomac and the Manahoac tribes. In addition to that, we are honored to have this event in a space that was central to the Fredericksburg community for more than 200 years. Caroline Street was Fredericksburg's retail entertainment center. It used to be called Main Street, and it was even said that Thomas Jefferson and George Washington frequented these streets. This very location used to be the Victoria Theater, one of the 20 theaters managed by Benjamin T. Pitts throughout Southern Virginia and West Virginia. The theater opened in October of 1937 and was the flagship and headquarters of the Pitts Theater. In 1990, this theater was acquired by the Fredericksburg Baptist Church. It's important to mention that this particular site was the headquarters for the white congregation when the church split in 1855. Additionally, the church served as a hospital for the wounded soldiers during the Civil War. And now, even though this particular location served mainly white members of Fredericksburg in the past, here we are today at an event that really connects many different communities together through the lens of Afro-diasporic music and dance. So, as the day passes and you go through the sessions, I want you really to stop and think about all the history that has occurred and transpired within these walls and the floor that we walk on today. Now, are we ready to get this event started? Yeah! So to give us our welcome message, I will pass it over to our Executive Director, Ms. Icha Lopez.
Good morning, everybody. I'm so excited to be here and to have all of you here with us and to those virtually as well. Today, I am filled with pride, happiness, and gratitude. After over a year of planning, we are finally here. We are coming together as a community locally, but also from different parts of the United States and internationally, such as Long Beach, California, and Oakland, also Chicago, Illinois, and Hidalgo, Mexico. To all of you, welcome. Today we have a great program that begins with a keynote speech, then followed by a panel discussion, followed by afternoon workshops, evening performances, all taking place in this space. Just to give you some perspective about the idea of this event, it started as a conversation between Jose Polo, one of the members of this organization, and myself, sometime around 2020. Due to our curiosity about the African diaspora music and dance practices. For example, we're talking about how the names of musical rhythms that are found in bomba, also found throughout the Caribbean, and in the Southeast US? How are these related to carbon music and dance practices? Among many other questions that we were just talking in friendly conversations. The full title of the event, The Banyan Tree of the Americas, Music Evolution in the African Diaspora, was inspired by the similarities between bomba and other African diaspora music and dance genres. For those that are not familiar with the banyan tree, it has a series of aerial roots that develop from the branches, which descend to the floor, to the soil, and take root in it. And it falls, and each of those becomes new trunks. We compare this to our event in that Africa is the main trunk as it expands its branches to the Caribbean and the Americas, and it develops new roots. Those musical and dance practices we're going to be talking about, for example, that spread throughout the world. In 2021, we hosted a series of 3 events with the same event, and we shared bomba with gospel, tap dance, and West African dance. The panel discussions from that event are available on YouTube if you want to go see them. It is uncommon to find events like this in Fredericksburg, and I also know it is beyond needed in our community, not only socially, but also emotionally and spiritually. In times where division seems to be the focus, we need unity, connection, and uncomfortable conversations. Today, I hope you will take with you some understanding of the historical and foundation of Puerto Rican bomba and plena and how it connects to jazz, salsa, bullerengue, and cumbia. I hope that the conversations and teachings you will take today will open your minds to colonization and the untold stories of our ancestors that were not well documented or reflected in our history books. I also hope that as you listen today, you think about how we can all keep working together, because knowing what unites us, but also acknowledging our differences, we can become closer and stronger. I want to give a special thanks to our guests for helping sow the seed of knowledge. Hold on, I lost it. Sowing the cultural seed through this event. I can't wait while it unfolds. I have to thank the Semilla Cultural team for working so hard to make this happen. I know that I have probably texted the group chat more than 20,000 times in the past 3 weeks. I also want to thank our partners, CLAVES, UNIDOS, and Fredericksburg Art Museum. It's always a pleasure. And finally, to our sponsors to support us, Fredericksburg Arts Commission, Virginia Commission for the Arts, Mid-Atlantic Arts, and Dominion Energy. I will give it back to Eileene and enjoy the event.
Thank you for that welcome message, Tejada, and if I may, thank you for being such an amazing director to our group. We would not be where we are today without you. Your motivation, your inspiration, and I'm sure the DMV and mostly Fredericksburg, we wouldn't be where we are without you pushing and having that vision to get us where we are today, so thank you. Now, our first session to kick off our event will be a keynote by Dr. Noel Allende Goitia. His biography can be found on our Facebook page and our Instagram pages. So we do ask that you save your questions for the panel discussion that will come right after his keynote. For those online, if you have questions, you can post them and then we'll get to them when we start our panel discussion. But don't feel bad. If you have a question, just type it out. So without further ado, please help me welcome Dr. Noel.
Thank you very much. It's a privilege to be here and share whatever I know with you. I really want to just share with you some thoughts, some musical examples, just to provoke a conversation and reflection on that. So, taking the idea of the ceiba, the banyan tree, is part of a kind of trees that are considered a way of a connection between the invisible world and this physical world. But mainly what I want to do is share with you, that most major music and dance form practice and consuming this hemisphere and in the world have Afro-diasporic roots. This short presentation examines this global phenomenon in 2 ways. First, approaching the emergence and development of early pre- and post-1492 human mobility in the Euro-Mediterranean and Atlantic circuit by questioning what I call the anxiety of origins. Second, proposing the use of the term transhumans, transhumancia, as the core meaning of the well-established category of diaspora in the all-encompassing conceptual scaffolding of African diaspora. This presentation is an invitation to a long overdue conversation about human musicking through the interpretative lenses of African diaspora or human mobility experience. Today I'm reading the second paragraph. I want to bring your attention to the complex, dynamic, and adaptive human experience of mobility of transhumans from a broader geographical perspective, the pre-1492 and post-1492 Europe and its interaction with the massive African continent. Great part of the Americas musical production has a common denominator in the diverse population of people from Africa and of African descent. The African diaspora is the common denominator of the American, meaning the Americas. Okay? Hemisphere, music, great diversity, and its large and deep imprint in the hemisphere's musical culture. Now, usually when we talk about African diaspora, we think more of the slave trade. And yes, here I have to, it means that we concentrate our focus on the human traffic. And I'm not saying that we don't have to pay attention to that, but mainly we think the process in one direction, as a one direction, from the massive continent to our hemisphere. My proposition is to expand that view and use the concept of transhumancia, or transhumans, the human mobility, meaning that whatever cross the human population that crossed that body of water, the Atlantic, was part of this huge interconnected world of mobility. Meaning that when we think about European culture, we have to think of a culture that is the production of the interaction with the African continent and the Asiatic world. For instance, the whole culture of string, guitar, oud, and everything is the result in Europe, is the result of a process of creolization. And the new thing about this is that when we hear the word creolization, we think of ourselves. We are the one that creolize things. And this what is saying that the music culture that crossed the Atlantic and we call European culture is really the result of a process of creolization and miscegenation. And that is a painting from the 13th century, long before Columbus. You have an European culture that is mulata. So, this is an iconographic. This is an engraving of the port of Cadiz in 1564. Okay, thank you. You got it. This is England. The main and more preferred and admired trumpeter for Henry the VII and the VIII was a guy from West Africa. And he wasn't an exception. He wasn't the fly in the milk. You know, he was just part of an African population in England at that time. By 1520s, in a royal wedding in Portugal, the musicians were all this Afro-descendant from West Africa. And by 1545, in Spain, you have a full chapel of musicians from Mexico, from Mexicas and Tlaxcalas. So, it's the human mobility. So we have to think more about not where you come from. That's what I call the anxiety of origin. Where they come from? No, start asking what you're doing here. Why this group of people is here and they are not contributing to the culture. They are builders of the European culture. Then we have missionaries going to Africa, and then we start discovering, as I said in one of my essays, no, de tambor no solamente vive la cultura. No? African culture is not only drums. So the whole notion that we are good in rhythm but very bad in harmony and melody, no. Because you can go to places in the African continent today, bigger than the western part of the United States, in which the drums are not the main identity markers of the music produced in that area. You have here the famous Queen Nzinga from Congo with her entourage, and you have musicians playing music like trumpets, of course, drums, but then in the 17th century, you have in Peru that part of the music culture in Peru by the 17th century, between the 1600 and 1700, is a native musician playing melodic and harmonic instrument. That's another celebration, but also you have what is called los diablos danzantes, umarrachos, o gigantes, that you will find in the Caribbean and also in the Pacific in South America. Okay. This is a big celebration in 1748, but I want to show this corner down here. Among that celebration, you have a native population of Portugal, of black people playing guitar as part of the celebration. But at this time, this is a reflection of the influence of the Afro-diasporic music of the Americas having an impact in European music. So, you have an African diaspora that is fed not only by the enslaved people, but also by free moving people of Africa and of African descent. In the painting of the castas in Mexico, you have a pairing between mulattoes or people of African descent and melodic instrument. Even Miguel de Cervantes in El Extremeño is a novel. He equates guitar playing with black people. Why? Because everyone knew that that kind of instrument was related with not only North Africa, but also with the sub-Saharan kingdoms and empire. And through that sub-Saharan kingdom and empire, they were related with the savannas of West Africa, or what they call Guinea, or Guinea. And then you have, in Mexico, for instance, guitars and harp, especially in Veracruz. The harp is considered an African diasporic instrument, not an European one. And in Puerto Rico, in 1686, there's a record in which, in the Corpus Christi, you have Afro-Puerto Rican dancing in front of the main altar, accompanied not by drums, but by guitars and harp, dressed like umarachos inside the church. So, but then you have these representations of black dances with drums. Okay? That if you pay attention, you say, well, if they don't tell me that this is from one of the French islands, that could be any place in Puerto Rico, in Dominican Republic, in Cuba, in Cartagena, Colombia, or today Venezuela and Suriname, or even Brazil. And then you have the stick fight that now in Puerto Rico is being brought a revival of Coco Ballet. But for instance, the calypso, the musical genre calypso, is based on the stick fight. Although you don't see a stick fight when they are playing soca. But the whole thing of the tiraera, of talking about the other calypsonian, is part of that tradition of stick fighting that still you see in hip hop and in reggaeton. This is in Jamaica, Kingston, Jamaica. And this is a musical example of a chacona. The chacona is a musical genre born in the Americas, an Afro-American music genre that was creolized in Europe. But you learn about the chacona in a music conservatory as a classical music. But it's a song, dance, musical genre, and how it sounds. Hello. And you can dance this with the son jarocho zapateado. And if you know how to dance and use the maracas in the joropo, the same. And if you know how to dance, this kind of dance was danced by the kings of Portugal and Spain. And the bishops were like, how you dare to play and dance that so, like reggaeton-like dance. Now, okay, sorry. I need to move on. Hello. Okay. Now, but that kind of dance also was sung and danced in front of the main altar at church during Christmas Eve and the Corpus Christi. Were not part of the Mass, but they used what was danced outside in the carnival. Oh, no. Okay. Now, this is other dance form born in the Americas and creolized in Europe called sarabanda. It's talking black people going to worship Jesus Christ. He said, this night he is our family. So this night we are white. You can think of it. Nosotros no somos como esos negros de Angola, que son bien feos. That has a history. Because in the Americas, this was the first representation of blackface. In Sevilla were white people that paint their faces of black and talk like they thought the black people would dance. But what you have to read under that is that they knew how to dance because they hang out with them outside church. So the colonizers were colonized. And ¿cómo regreso? Okay. Now, this is a 17th and 18th century music called El Congo. And what is the amazing thing is that formally trained musicians, by order of the bishop, went out and transcribed this song and dance. And it sounds like this, and you will notice something. La tonada del Congo is with harp. And he's talking about the Virgin Mary and baby Jesus. Now we are going to sing to Jesus, baby Jesus, as we Congo sing. And in this case, it's not a white guy pretending to be black. It's one guy who transcribed how the Congos at that time sang in church. Now, sorry I'm running. That means that when we talk, thank you, that when we talk about cumbia, salsa, bullerengue, bomba, plena, and jazz, you have to think that as part of a network of people. So when you talk about music, as I said to my student, you don't go walking down the street and say, oh, look, a piece of music. No, for you to find music, you have to find a breathing, warm body. Someone with a history. Because music is an embodied thing. So, whatever connects those things are not only the musical characteristics that are music than some form. It's the people that perform those music. So it's not the music, it's the musicking. So, at this moment, so in that sense, and this, I wrote it after a conversation with Ibelis and Maida. Afro-transhumans is the connecting tissue, the rhizome that germinate in the most unexpected places and times. It is the presence, the bodily presence that we have to talk when we talk about this music. The Afro-diasporic experience and sense of being is an embodied one. Its musicking is an incarnated one, meaning that our lived agency is the theorizing in the flesh. Okay? This is an example of Andean cumbia or chicha music. Sorry. And this is in the Pacific, so it's a combination. I'm not listening. Okay. So this is not the Caribbean, this is not the Atlantic, this is the Pacific.
Me duelen tus palabras con que matas mis ilusiones. Donde mueren ilusiones, miles de sueños, miles de
Haremos tiempo a tiempo.
A ver si esto se muere, aunque no quiera la vida, si he de vivir sin tu amor. Me duelen tus palabras con que matar mis ilusiones. Donde mueren ilusiones, miles de sueños, miles se mueren. Le daremos tiempo al tiempo, él nos dirá qué sucede. A ver si esto se muere, aunque no quiera la vida, si he de vivir sin tu amor. Yo tenía para darte.
Ahora, ¿qué sucede en el mambo? Eso es un guayno. Usando zampoñas y quenas. Ese es el grupo ASKIS, que en los 80 crea, y terminamos con lo siguiente. Simplemente es el movimiento de personas que hay que seguir y es lo que conecta a todos. Muchas gracias por su atención y podemos
Panelists and moderator.
Thank you so much, Dr. Allende Goitia, for such an amazing message, and it was really enlightening in the end, and for your amazing dance moves. I mean, I hope that everyone, got to learn a little bit today from his message, and I know you have, some questions after that talk. So our next portion of the event is the panel discussion, which will be moderated by Professor Alicia Diaz. So Alicia, take it away.
Muchas gracias. I am so happy, delighted, and humbled to be standing here in front of you. And Noel, thank you for that incredible cátedra. That was a master class of, in many ways, right, the decentering of those dominant narratives that render our culture, our contributions invisible, the cultural erasure, that if we are not standing in the presence of these master classes, we don't know, right? We just don't know. And so I think this is so powerful. Thank you, and for the emphasis on the presence of the body, the humanity, that people matter, that everything that we call culture is because of the human beings that are living, that are making, that are doing, and that was something that I know that I wanted to also talk about more in the panel. But I'll invite those that are going to talk, Eileene and Marlene and Tashara, to come and join the seats. Yay. Beautiful. I had wanted to do a couple of things before starting the conversation. And one is, I really want to uplift the land and labor acknowledgement that was done at the beginning of the program, and that is something that I had thought of also bringing forward. It seems really important to me, especially in the kind of work that we are doing, to take the time to think about the first stewards of the land that we stand on. And so I'm not going to read the one that I had brought, but I wanted to add to what was done before with the way in which I often close land acknowledgements saying that acknowledging the first stewards of this land and the many who have built what is now known as the United States serves as an initial step in the process of healing the deep wounds of our shared history. While we cannot change our past, examining our history and how the collective we got here is vital for understanding our current reality and for building a more just and equitable future. And while this offering alone may not decolonize our society, we aim to decolonize knowledge as a catalyst for social transformation, which is so much what I felt we were in the presence of today. I wanted also to take the time to introduce the rest of the panelists and to take the time to uplift their work. I think that matters, that words matter, and that what we hear in the space stays and creates the energy around us. So I'm gonna take the time to do that here. I'm gonna start with Tashara, Gavin-Moorehead, right here. Tashara is a professional dancer, choreographer, educator, and emerging dance scholar, currently based out of Long Beach, California. In the last 15 years, she has danced with In Spirit Dance Company, VC Dance Theater, Deeply Rooted Dance Theater, Lula Washington Dance Theater, and Yasatinka Music and Dance Ensemble. Tashara has presented her independent work in numerous artistic venues, and she loves the art of teaching and teaches at a variety of universities and in public schools throughout Los Angeles and Long Beach. She's currently researching the relationship between the Embuso Saba and jazz improvisation as a liberation practice, and is deeply committed to the continued fight for liberation and freedom for people of the African diaspora. So welcome, Tashara. Marley Perez, percussionist, musician, was born in Barranquilla, Colombia, the Atlantic North Coast, and home to the biggest carnival in Colombia, and has been involved in music and dancing since very early back in Colombia. Marley has been playing percussion and performing in the Washington, D.C. metro area for the past 20 years. Marley is currently the co-founder and musical director of the musical group La Marvela, amazing, which plays and highlights the richness of Colombia Afro-Indigenous rhythms such as cumbia and bullerengue. As a percussionist, Marley also specializes in Afro-Brazilian drumming and Bahia, Brazil, Axé, and Samba reggae, and has played for many years in the DC area, as well as New York City, San Francisco, Houston, Brazil, Mexico, the UK, with Batala, Washington. As the assistant musical director, and when times allow, she plays djembe and dunduns with the Bele Bele Rhythm Collective Group in DC. Thank you, welcome. And Dr. Eileene Tejada has a doctorate in anthropology and social change. She is an anthropological researcher and ethnographic writer committed to decolonizing knowledge. As an anthropologist who is engaged both in scholarly work and in activism, Dr. Tejada writes about the history of bomba, a form of cultural production which is birthed by the Taino-African Alliance in resistance to the processes of colonization and slavery in Puerto Rico. Dr. Tejada is also a poet who is writing a book about the impact of European colonization and the transatlantic slave trade in the historical development of the Taino and African roots of her own Puerto Rican family. Dr. Tejada has taught English composition, literature, and critical thinking for 35 years, 30 of them at Napa Valley College. She's passionately committed to the promise of educational access and supports higher education for all. Welcome. Thank you. Beautiful. Well, I thought I know there must be many questions here, and also I don't want to forget people online, though I'm not sure how I process that, so I am trusting that somebody else will also be doing that. And I have prepared some questions, but really I think that the more conversation that we can have, the better. So I will constantly go back and forth. If there are questions that you have, I will for sure center those, and then I can come to some of the questions that I also had. But as a beginning, perhaps, I thought we had the privilege of hearing from Noel extensively, to perhaps take a few moments first for each one of you, to tell us a little bit about the forms that you want to talk about today, that you study and that you practice, and how they are significant in your own lives, how you came to them, perhaps as an entry point to begin.
Okay, I'll take it away. So I have been dancing, all my life, and jazz has been a part of my dance education. As growing up in Virginia, I had the pleasure and the privilege of being a part of public school dance education programs, not just private studios. With that being said, jazz is primarily taught as musical theater, which is predominantly based in like a modern or ballet formalized movement genre. It was not until I moved to LA and I began dancing with Lula Washington Dance Theater, and then Jazz Antigua, which is directed by Pat Taylor, that I began to really understand the roots that jazz was in fact African American. So for those many years because I'm 37, so a good portion of my upbringing in dance was that jazz was like white, and the musical theater and the Broadway, that's what jazz was. It was really in 2015, like I said, when I moved to Los Angeles, that I began to start to learn the truth and the history that jazz was an African American music and dance tradition, and that it had been colonized, and that many dancers do not learn the truth of its African American heritage, and therefore not learning about its African origins. And it's interesting because as a dancer, we are not privy to that, but musicians do know that jazz is black. And so learning that there's this great divide in jazz, that the music and the dance are now no longer married as they were in the 1900s. There's this big miseducation still going on in our university settings as well as the studio settings. I mean, it's just across the board that jazz is not placed in its correct place in dance within the African diaspora. It's not as huge of an issue in the musician side, but it is such an issue on the dance side that we still have practitioners who feel some type of way that jazz is in fact black and that jazz is in the African diaspora. And so I feel very passionate. I went back for my MFA in 2019, and I began doing my research around jazz improvisation to regain and to renew myself in that jazz is something of my people, of my lineage, my great-grandmothers, grandmothers. We are jazz, and like people can't take that away from us. And I've just been dedicated to that type of movement and practice, that if I can liberate myself from colonized thoughts and move throughout them, how can that help other people move through their colonization in like their mind, their bodies, and their spirit? And I think that jazz is a healing method because of its potent roots and its healing mechanisms that come all the way, through Africa. So I just feel blessed and fortunate that it feels like we're turning the tide in jazz dance, particularly, is being situated in African diasporic conversations, because it's a long way to go, at least in the academy, of jazz dance being situated properly.
Same question?
Yeah.
Thank you for having me here. Hope everybody can hear me. My name is Perez. I am originally from Colombia. When I thought about studying like an Afro-Indigenous Colombian group, I actually doubted myself because I didn't think people were going to appreciate or understand the music. And to me, so then I started doing all the other type of music, percussion, and then I felt like I was actually not honoring my ancestry by not doing what I was born doing. So I just decided, I turned it, and I started finding people that wanted to play with me, and some of them, luckily I was able to find another Colombian by playing another band, totally different, other Colombian women that wanted to join me. And we started playing, just practicing, and our purpose was really just to honor our ancestry as Colombian immigrants in the US. We didn't want to lose that. As musicians, as people who grew up dancing and playing and singing our music. I'm also indigenous, so it was like I didn't want to lose that part of me. And the way I started honoring was just playing, starting practicing, and then we started people that started getting interested in joining us. Then a year later, we started performing, and that's how I've been sort of honoring my ancestry with the music. And actually, people do appreciate it, and they actually have more questions. And that was the whole point. So for me, is as a Colombian immigrant, is honoring my ancestry. I do have a niece and some cousins that they didn't grow up in Colombia like I did, and I just wanted to have that as well. And then we actually have performed in schools, and we have children of Colombian immigrants that come to us, or people that just moved from Colombia when they were children, and they come to us and they appreciate that they were hearing that here. And then also the fact that there are women playing the drums. That was a big thing, more than I thought, honestly. Because I was, as Bullerengue and Cumbia are both very matriarch music, and at the same time as the indigenous communities in Colombia, so to me that was the norm. Then I did find out throughout the life that women were not allowed to actually play the main drum. It's called the Allende drum, which is what I play. And I was like, oh, I didn't know that. But I know that when I was a kid, I just thought that I was not allowed to do it because I was young. So like there's this hierarchy on the elders. So in my mind, it was because I was not an elder, not because I was a woman. Then later in life, I found out that women are not allowed to play that. It said that you clap, you can play maraca, you can dance, and you can sing. But the drums are actually played by the male elders. But again, to me, it was just because it was the elders. When I tried to actually play and have people teach me, they wouldn't teach me. So I had to learn actually by, I'm a musician, so I learned on my own through my learnings of conga and other drumming. And then it wasn't until maybe about 7 years ago that I actually found a teacher who was a woman who was willing to teach me. And she just pretty much fixed things that because again, I learned them just by watching, and when the people show you, they just don't want to teach you, but they show you. So then to me, I decided that I was going to continue what my teacher did with me, and I teach other people, not just women, but like, this is how if you want to learn, this is how you properly learn, from hearing to playing to the techniques, or also like children, while teaching the culture and honoring where I came from.
So my name is Eileene Tejada, and I would say that I come from the north of the Big Island of the Archipiélago of Puerto Rico, a pueblo called Arecibo, from a village called Bajadero. I am an Afro-Indigenous, Afro-Taína woman, and my quest started at the age of 7, when I discovered that my paternal grandmother had been erased, and came upon her story quite by accident. From that time, I kind of set on this quest to find her. She died during the tuberculosis epidemic, was sent to Rio Piedras, a sanitarium in Rio Piedras. She died, and her body was not collected. She was buried in a mass grave, and there's a whole story around that, because I think that I've been looking for the mass graves, and I understand that the San Juan Airport is a kind of paved over the graves, and those bodies, some were exhumed, but it's not clear that all of them were not. So imagine discovering that I might be taking off and landing on Abuelita at the San Juan. So what got me thinking about the processes of colonization and the impact on my family and what that meant to me and my identity. Then I happened onto bomba. My father was a percussionist and never knew that he only played on Cuban drums. He never understood that the drums that he was playing on were not necessarily our drums. He did not know, and the people of Arecibo, only a handful of people in Arecibo know about the barril, the Puerto Rican drum. And I think that is a travesty. The effects and the erasure of colonization are very real and impactful. I came across bomba. I have found out that one of my great-grandfathers played bomba with Don Rafael Cepeda Diles. So I started to find lineage. Now, I came upon bomba at the age of 50. I knew about commercialized bomba, but I did not know about the indigenous Afro-ceremonial practice of bomba. And so in doing the research to find out about my grandmother, to find Abuelita, I have entered into the world of bomba, never to return. It is a world that is vast. I currently teach the epistemology and the pedagogies of bomba in a class at the College of Ethnic Studies at San Francisco State. I'm a lecturer there, ground zero for ethnic studies. And so I am working on a book that will connect, right, have us explore the healing properties of bomba, right? As I come into bomba, what have I discovered in this world? And I am very, very interested in the embodied knowledge that bomba allows us to not just exhibit in the bade, but also how bomba removes the ancestral trauma markers from our DNA. So I've kind of taken that route in addition to, I'm very committed to taking epistemologies, that is bodies of knowledge, such as bomba, and how we transmit them over time, despite the fact that they have been outlawed. How do we transmit those? Those ways of teaching I want to transfer into the classroom so that we can decenter Eurocentric epistemologies and pedagogies and better tend to our students. So that's kind of like what I'm doing in a nutshell.
Amazing. I wanna sort of open it all the time back and forth and kind of invite the audience, if you have questions right now already for Noel, for all the panelists that just spoke, that we can do that. And if there's no burning question right now, I will go back to mine, but could we take a moment and just at this centering the embodied experience that you're all talking about, just right now, like shouting out, what comes up for you when you hear the different stories, right? What is in your heart right now? What do you feel? Just shouting that out. Pride. Joy. Empowerment. Liberation. Ancestry. Yes, wisdom. Beautiful. I'm thinking of the many things that you brought up. I have different trajectories I want to go into, so I'm going to choose one and then come back. But thinking about improvisation that you brought up, and these embodied knowledges, right? That these forms son saberes, right? Like I've been thinking a lot about the difference between like knowledge, conocimiento, and saberes, which may go more like with wisdom that someone said. Like what are the saberes that we learn through these forms? And thinking about improvisation in particular, as one of the Brenda Dixon Gottschalk is a dance artist scholar that talks about the Africanist characteristics. And improvisation plays a role there, right? Both as creativity and as resistance and liberation and strategies of liberation in the context of systemic oppression. So I'm thinking if there might be ways in which you can connect that idea of liberation and however it resonates with you from where you are coming from, including Noel in these maybe historical, forms, and perhaps you came across also aspects of improvisation that play a role.
Well, what I presented today is only part of more complete research that I started in the Americas, and then I discovered that, for instance, the case of Puerto Rico, they only talk, as I was taught, that we can talk about only African or African descent culture in Puerto Rico after 1510, when is recorded the first landing of slave people. But then I started reading and discovered that with Juan Ponce de Leon, part of his army and captains were people of African descent from Guinea. Spanish-speaking Catholic, very loyal people to the king. And of course, then I started crossing the Atlantic and say, okay, that means that when we talk about in the Americas about African culture, we don't only have to go through African, the obvious suspect, but that all that language that we talk about, miscegenation and creolization, we don't apply that to Europe. And then I crossed the Mediterranean, and then I started to discover all this connection. But for instance, in the case of improvisation, that is a problem and a term used after the 20th century. And especially with the emergence of jazz, that originally is a dance form. So that's why in the United States and in Puerto Rico, when you go to a jazz program, you see all these kids playing jazz without moving their body, because they don't know that the origins are an embodied one. But then also is the trap of, yes, improvisation is liberation, but European music and most of the music in the world are improvising based music form. And yes, we can appropriate the improvisation as a way of liberation because life is improvising. Anyone is born with a score. And how are you going, your life is going to be played. You discover the score when you die. when the music is already played.
Right.
But also, improvisation has been used as a way of saying, yes, you only know how to improvise, you don't know how to read music.
Right.
And what is the problem with that? That is not the history of jazz music, because most of the musicians that are responsible for the formation of this metagenre that I call metagenre jazz is a combination of musicians that know how to play by ear, but they also knew how to read the score. So in that sense, it's a myth that the only good thing that black folks do is improvising. But it's part of the appropriation and cultivation process, and that's why some people say, jazz is black? It's when people discover that rock and roll is black. Say, what? Well, because that whole process of corruption and stolen is part of erasing the agency of the body. So in that sense, yes, jazz, salsa, and all these musical forms, as any other form, including classical music, is learned by ear. There's no other way for you to learn music. Improvisation disappeared in European so-called classical music during the 90th century, when reading, solfeo, and everything started to be emphasized. And I finish with this. That's why at the beginning of the 20th century, all the performers of classical music, they have to learn the improvisation of each piano and violin concerto, because by the beginning of the 20th century, the tradition of improvisation was lost at the Conservatory of Music. So, if you were a viola player for Johann Sebastian Bach and you didn't know how to improvise, Johann Sebastian Bach would fire you on the spot, because that was, and Johann Sebastian Bach was one of the musicians that creolized sarabandas and chacona, and now is played as classical music without recognizing that it's a creolization of an Afro-American musical form.
So I'm going to go a different route with this. I contend that the spiritual and the secular were never divided in indigenous cultures. And improvisation is a way in which to rescue what the ancestors want to say at any particular moment. All right? So when I look at bomba, I see it as the alliance of the Taínos and of the African. And I have my research to show why I come to that conclusion. I don't believe that bomba was birthed in the sugarcane plantations because of the white gaze, and because of what bomba does, that would not be able to happen under the white gaze, under the colonizer's gaze. They may have at some point introduced it into the plantation system, but what I know about the plantation system is that you were constantly under surveillance and that our bodies were totally under the control of the master. And what that means is really what it meant to be enslaved. And I want to add here that the first enslaved people, and I want to be careful how I say this because I don't want anyone to walk away saying, oh my gosh, you know, she's trying to lessen blackness. Absolutely not. Okay? But I do want us not to reproduce the erasure of the role of the indigenous people in the alliance with the African. Because in that alliance, I believe exists our ability to liberate Puerto Rico and other communities. You cannot, when you understand the processes of colonization in service to capitalism, an economic system which was driven, right? The slave trade was the way capitalism became global, all right? You cannot liberate, we can't liberate ourselves in isolation from each other. So that's my, that we have, what I love about Bomba is, it is imperfect, a ceremony that celebrates that alliance. You can't talk about Bomba if you remove the bate, a Taino word. And I know that Taino is problematic, but that's the one I'm going to use until we come up with something. You know, when we discover the other term, I'll find. But you cannot, you don't have Bomba without the bate. You don't have Bomba without the maraca. And it's not a maraca made of coconut. It's a maraca made of higuera. Where does the higuera come from? What is it? It's an indigenous plant from the Caribbean. Okay? So when I see that type of alliance, that you can't do Bomba without any of its parts, right? The drum, the rhythms. Then I just feel like that is a way of resistance. And what happens in the bate? The bate is a liminal space. So again, the spiritual and the secular are not separated. That is a colonial, that's a colonial effect. So you have alliance building, in the bate, you have the decolonizing of the body. For however long you're in the bate. The bate is a liminal space. And that conversation between the dancer and the drum creates a particular decolonizing of the space. Sylvia Federici's book, The Caliban and the Witch, she said that on the rise of capitalism, what it did was it enclosed time and space. Our ancestors, both on the African continent and in this hemisphere, did not define time and space the way we do now. And I want you, those of you who dance Bomba or who dance any of the dances, right? When you are dancing, are you conscious of the present, past, and future? How does it feel in your body when you are talking to the drum, doing the piquetes, moving the skirt, the vibration that is created by the drum? And those of you who drum, have you noticed that if one of the drums isn't being played, the skin on the drum is still vibrating, even when no one is playing it? All right? That those vibrations, those kinds of activities that are not secular, they are all very spiritual in combination. Who's speaking through? Who's coming through? And how is that wave of what's coming through, those vibrations, how is that affecting your body and awakening the knowledge that you already carry? Those are the kinds of things that I'm very interested in such the healing properties of Bomba. You cannot sit in a bombazo, and I would say in the other practices, and feel sad. You may enter that space feeling downtrodden, but you don't leave that way. And that, I think, the beauty of improvisation is that it allows for the ancestor to speak. And as that ancestors speak, there is a process of healing and decolonizing that is taking place. And so that's some of what my research is doing. So that's how I would answer that question.
You know, as an improvisational dance artist, like one of the things that like sparked me to go deeper and to like feel some type of way. I was like, when I started to learn like jazz is black, jazz is African American, I'm like, hold up now. If it's black, if it's African American, that means it's spiritual. That means it's rooted in like what my grandmother is singing. Like it's rooted in a spiritual awakening. It's in the hallelujah. It's in the praise dance, right? And it made me upset because jazz is so whitewashed that of course there's no spiritual practice in it because we believe in separation of the church and the state here in America. Like there's so many white ideologies and white American thoughts that have permeated into jazz, especially in the dance world per se, that there is minimal spiritual acknowledgement. We sure as hell aren't talking about anything ancestral. And in my work, I was like, nah, I'm reclaiming this. So like my thesis was called A Return to Spirit. Like I was going to return to my African American roots, that jazz is a Southern, it began in the South where black folks were being, taken in captivity. And that sort of declaration and reclaiming of my ancestry, that for a lot of African Americans who we have this debate in the culture, like, are we black American? Are we just black? Are we African American? What are we calling ourselves? Because folks feel like if they have not been to Africa, they don't know Africa, then they cannot claim their African roots. The thing that I encourage those folks is I can go back and forth and interchangeable. Is like, well, if you can trace your roots back to your Southern roots, well, then we're starting somewhere. So for a lot of folks, black folks feel connected to their Southern roots. I'm like, well, if that's where we begin our history, then that's where it's a better start than just saying we don't know where we come from. Because I'm like, that spiritual, we would not be here as black Americans without our spirituality. We didn't get here and remain a part of the American fabric and the foundation of America without our perseverance and our overcoming and our belief in the supernatural, the unseen. And that's what I feel jazz is. It's what is felt and it is what is heard. It is not what's seen. And so that the return to spirit, that it's the mind, body, spirit in jazz that is like woven from our roots, whether people want to go all the way back to Africa, where it should be. But if we even began it in our Southern roots, it's still there in the ring shout. It's still there in our spirituals. And the improvisational part is really interesting in dance academia, because most dance institutions or dance programs are ran by modern and ballet genres. Anything black is an elective, and we are now just in the 2020 with George Floyd, we're now just seeing like, oh, it's kind of whitewashed. Like, so we're finally looking at the racism that has plagued, all these dance programs, and that anything other than the ballet and the modern was an elective. That improvisation is most certainly not going to be emphasized because it's not codified. And codified is the lay of the land. You can write it down, and you can structure it, and you can document it, and that means it's real. So anything dance or musically that is improvised is looked at as lower than, it's not a skill. And for the life of me, teaching my students is like, oh, y'all can't really, I tell them, like, y'all can't really dance because y'all can't improvise. If someone's not telling you what to do, I said, that is so whitewashed. That is so white supremacist. Somebody has to tell you what the step is. You can't hear nothing in the music. You're not listening to it. I'm like, because you're dead. You're dead on the inside. If you were really alive, you would actually hear what it is, and that's intuition. That's spirituality. You have to actually empathize with what you think the music is doing for you, what you're actually feeling. So I told all my students, like, y'all can't dance. You can dance when you can actually hear the music and start to move with what is happening in that present moment. That past, present, and future is happening simultaneously. You are your ancestors are in you right now. You look like you are because of your ancestors. And whatever you got going on inside of you will be your descendant. So your past, your present, and your future is not so metaphysical, you know, for the students that I teach. I'm like, it's very much a physical reality right now. And you should be able to improvise, like we're saying, your day-to-day choices. It's not about my students because, you know, it's like TikTok land and, you know, it's Instagram, you know, they get real self-conscious about improvising. Like, if it's not taught, they can't do it. But I'm like, if you look at improvisation not as a free-for-all, I'm like, because y'all don't know what free means. You know, if you ask somebody, like a younger person right now, like, what is freedom? They're like, well, I just want to feel free. I'm like, free of what? What do you want to feel free from? You can't feel free unless you acknowledge that there's a restriction, that there's something holding you back. What are you trying to free yourself from? And then we get the looks, and I'm like, exactly. That's that misogynistic, that's that patriarchy, that's that racism, that's that colorism, that's that, you gotta lay it off, right? I'm like, that's why you feel some type of way, and that's why you don't know how to dance, because you don't know what you're trying to free yourself from. But I'm like, as soon as you start to see that improvisation is about your choices, what choices are you making and what values do you have? Are you valuing the white man or are you valuing something else? Do you value your own self, and what does that mean to make choices in your movement that actually align with that? My kids just look at me like I'm crazy, but they get it eventually. You work it inside of, like, improvisation feels good because it's within us. That it's not like a magic potion of dose. We talk like, why do people love? Because white folks are so inside of jazz. They just want to be here. They want to claim it. They want to throw in the Irish roots. They want to claim. They will throw in whatever parts that they can. But I'm like, if you really sit down with yourself and you think about, like, why is there a centering of whiteness in jazz? I'm like, it can't be, because jazz makes us feel good. And for the most part, stuff that's predominantly white, not even European, whitewash, don't make us feel good. Why are folks so interested in black things and African diasporic things? I argue, because it makes you feel good. Because it's in alignment with a past, a present, and it's in alignment with something bigger than us. It's something felt. And so people will always want to come into the forums because of the knowledge that already exists. Versus when we go into other forms, you know, they're cute, they're pretty, they're gorgeous, all of the above. But it's not, you're not getting the same essence back.
Improvisation. I actually use that a lot also in the bullerengue and cumbia community. Improvisation is also connection. So just following what everyone pretty much has said, just taking it from another aspect. Musically or dancing, when you're able to improvise, it's because you're connected. So you are connected with the other musicians, you're connected with the other dancers, and something happens where it's a spiritual form, and then you are able to understand that language, and then that's when you're able to improvise, because you're feeling the music, you're feeling the connection with, cumbia and bullerengue are both, and I can talk a little more about that, the history, but they're all danced same thing as wombat, in circle. So we dance and we play that in a circle. And even when we are rehearsing, even when we're learning, because we're following that energy that passes around. And what happens is like all of a sudden somebody starts improvising and then the dancer happens and then the maraca happens. And then sometimes even with my group performing, sometimes we do things while we're performing and we're like, what just happened? And I love it because I feel we're connected. You know, so that's why it's so important. For bullerengue music, both as cumbia, but bullerengue, a lot of people don't know about bullerengue, that it's even like an older form of cumbia. And it was actually started when people used to do it for funerals. So like there's a form called lumbalu, a form of like what they call to be the first form of bullerengue. It was called lumbalu, it was only performed at funerals. And then there's a spiritual aspect, and there's a ceremonial that will happen. And there are specific sounds that people will make when they were singing, because it was both a celebration and sadness of losing a life, but also celebration of a life. Then it also went to the form of fertility. From there, there's the bullerengue form of fertility, where the drums will play and the dancer will dance a certain way. You know, there's been studies as to how do they know that that's how you dance. No one can tell you. And it is a dance form that is followed, and there's no such thing as written music or written steps or videos that you can follow. You have to go to the source, and you have to learn it, and you have to experience it, and you have to feel the connection. And then from there, that's when you feel all that, and when it's in you, then you express it out by improvising. So that's my take, short take on after everybody else.
I'm thinking as I listen to all of you that it doesn't, what you were describing of those knowledges, ancestral and spiritual, does not exclude the sort of technologies of knowing how to compose, how to choreograph, in the sense of you're attending to time, to space, to meaning, to relationship. So it is an incredible amount of knowledge that comes into improvisation in the act of being able to do that in every single choice that is happening in the moment. And that is extraordinary, right? So it is not on the fly, which is what you all have been bringing forward. And they're not mutually exclusive. Spirit and those technologies of knowledge of improvisation are together, right? They're together. Thank you. Yeah. Are there questions?
So my question is for, I'm sorry, what was your name with Diaz?
Tashara.
Tashara, okay. So I just wanted to know, like, in your experience prior to moving to LA and understanding of the Black history in jazz, what did improvisation mean to you prior to that? Was it something that you understood, like was it a different understanding, or what did that look like to you?
Yes, it was predominantly sculpted by a Western modern dance-based practice. So although I began improvising as a young dancer in the 4th grade, I had my talent shows and I used hip hop and house music. When I was in those public dance school educational programs, their idea of improvisation is formulated by Western construct principles. So even though we have the time, the space, and the energy in improvisation, they're molded by, one, there's no music. So for a large majority, if you're going through an improvisational practice through a Western construct, music is either background music, like you were to not pay attention to it, it's ambient, or you just move through it. So we don't know how to count that, we're not listening to no measures, no pulse. It is very atmospheric, and you don't have a relationship with it. You're mainly focused on body principles, so how your body moves through different shapes and maybe some different relationships, but and it's like very tool and skill based in making a product. Or the other thing is that the improvisation is only to generate for choreography. So it's usually those two things that are the primary like mover of what an improvisation practice is in a modern sort of form. So, and I've talked about it like, you know, in meeting my students halfway, because I understand where they're coming from, and like jazz improvisation is much more complex. It's way more complex than in a modern way because of that relationship with the music. I'm like, yeah, no, you have to pay attention, but that's not the primary. That's not where you come from in a modern. So I had that training in improvisation for 8, about 10 years. 10 years I was ingrained in an improvisational practice that was devoid of music, definitely devoid of spirit, and you're predominantly moving. It's to help you set choreography. You might get a little contact improv, but it's interesting that I looked at like contact improv. I call it like it's really crunchy granola, so it's about like touching and feeling and body weight and shifting. And it's interesting because they don't call partner dancing or swing dancing contact improv, right? Like it's these words that they've used to define something. I'm like, well, they're technically doing contact. Like the hands are touching, people are making eye, there's contact going on, but y'all don't call that contact improv. So it's always interesting to see how Western constructs have, pulled from African diasporic forms and make it, and it was really challenging to move away from a Western practice of improvisation. It was extremely hard because of that relationship with the music. And I am still in a practice of getting better because it's so devoided. Like we have professors who did not have we could not use music in our undergraduate program. Could not use music. They forbid it. Because they thought that the music would dictate your movement and therefore it was lesser. They don't want the music controlling the movement. And it's like, well, it's not controlling it, but that's what I mean. So dancers that are coming out of those practices of studio and or college, they have a very hollow sense of musicality and therefore their improvisational practice is hard. It's challenging.
That resonates. Like I think we share a lot of background of where we come from as dance artists. So all of that you're saying is resonating greatly. And as you were talking, I was thinking of the word task. So in a lot of these improvisation forms, you have tasks that you have to sort of resolve, right? You have problems that you resolve through improvisational tasks, which is devoid again of what you were saying, of the lived experience of the moment, right? Yeah.
I think that two things. We have to introduce the element of education because in every culture, the reproduction of music is mainly through hanging out, what I call education by hanging out. No? And what that means, for instance, the triumph and the main apport of the bombazos, the birth of the bombazos, is that it's a space of practice in which the kids can participate, and if the adult allow them just to move without saying, no, you don't dance like that. Improvisation is a learned thing because you participate in a community. And I know that because I was raised a Seventh-day Adventist. I learned how to dance salsa at 33. And past 50, I learned that my grandfather and my father used to play bomba, but my father never told me that because he didn't want me to go to the world and get lost. But is that, I mean, as long as we return to the process of learning, because that is what's happened. Why most Puerto Ricans don't know how to dance salsa? Because families have stopped dancing in their houses. You learn by imitation. So, every musical genre, when they return to practice that in terms of why you play cuatro, well, because my father was a cuatro player, or my brother, or my neighbor. That's the way you learn cuatro puertorriqueño, and that's the way the blues player learns to play blues. Because the father, the mother, the whatever, the lover, the neighbor, they used to play even if you just play 2 chords, but you play it because you learn by imitation. So, in that sense, returning to the notion of Western, one of the things that we have to decolonize is the term Western. Because we have to learn that Europe colonized itself. Because beneath all that musical culture and way of practicing music that we call Western, no, the separation of, how the hell can you separate movement from the music, the sound music? For us, it's like, whatever, I mean, whatever suit you. But what? Beneath that, when you go to the rural areas, even to urban areas, you see European musical practice based in the same principle of I learned this because my grandfather taught me, I learned this because my neighbor played the instrument. I mean, even the violin culture, Liszt, Brahms, and other appropriated violin techniques from the gypsies. But we say, oh, that is Western way of playing violin. And Kodai was thinking of the guy he met when he was a kid, a gypsy that played, and he composed a composition, and the title of the composition is the name of the guy. But no, it's classical music. So in that sense, that kind of Western way of thinking is not only hiding or erasing what we do the way we do, but it's also erasing ways in which music is done by other people that in Europe are not considered Western culture.
So I want to kind of continue in this vein, because I think that we need to understand the processes of colonization. I would say that it's not Western, it's colonized. We need to understand the process of colonization in order to resist it. And here I want to introduce Bell Hook's term, imperialist, white supremacist, capitalist, patriarchy. Those are the interlocking systems of oppression that we are trying to push against. And you cannot do it alone. So what I'm hearing you all talk about is we need to understand the sense of enclosure. You are absolutely right. Colonization colonization, the processes of colonization occurred in Europe beginning in the 1400s with the witch hunts, which were attacks on the curanderas of the peasant women of Europe. And the whole idea was to annihilate anyone in the population who did not need money as a means of exchange to survive. These were the people who were directly connected to the land in such a way that they were in relationship. There was kinship between them and the land, just like there is kinship between the African, indigenous African, and the land, just like in this hemisphere, Native Americans are saying, we are in kinship. We're not environmentalists. Vine Deloria Jr., right, who says, there's a difference between, an environmentalist and an indigenous person connected to the land. That connection meant that you were in communication. You were in communication, not just with the land, with the trees, with the networks of animals in your specific location. And out of that grew your spiritual practices. That system, that way of living was enclosed. The access to the commons, to the forest, to the waterways, in order to move people into urban centers in Europe. And I'll just say, the first person on earth to be called a savage was the European female. And I want to bring in, I'm going to queer this conversation, if I may, okay? Because this idea of two genders and all of that, that is a colonial mindset. We had a continuum of gender, two-spirited people that are still present in nature. How with the sense of enclosure, our bodies were enclosed, our minds are enclosed, right? The idea that we become machines, that the magic embodied in us, and I'm using that word in a very particular way, the spiritual realm, right, is disconnected. That's why the Trail of Tears, and there was a Trail of Tears in Africa also that's not talked about, but the Trail of Tears, in both hemispheres, it was a disconnection from the land, a loss of family relationship with nature that was lost, right? And so I just feel like when we talk about this Western modalities and Western thinking, it really is a synonym for colonization. That our spaces have been so colonized, our minds are colonized, our imaginations are colonized. What all of that means is that we are not in touch with who we really are, our identities, how we identify, whether in class, gender, sexual orientation, has every right to, or it is based on us being or growing up in and being educated in a capitalist society that's patriarchal and white supremacist. And that's one of the things that I think we don't know who we are. So how are we going to improvise? How do you improvise if you're not even connected to yourself? And I remember when I went into the Bomba Bate for the first time, and I'm feeling the music, what I was so amazed with was that I was connecting in a way I'd never had to the drum beat. And that was really that was where the piquetes came from. I could take a bomba class and I could do the counting and I could hit it with the skirt as many times. As a former dancer, I can do that. But when it came to getting into the bate and doing that, all my class was of no use. It didn't matter. It was different. I had stepped into a different realm. And so I think that that's also kind of important that we realize what are the processes of colonization so that we can recognize them. I'll stop there.
Yeah. I know we're close to our time. I do have another question that I would ask to finish, but I want to know if there's another question that we could do before from the audience. Yes.
I just want to give flowers. That's it. I just want to give you all flowers because it's really important to be having these conversations. I think that even when you see the promotions and stuff like that on the conversations, we usually have these conversations at a level where most people are not in the rooms, you know, using words and just, you know, this perspective, right? When we talk about Banyan and all these different, I know that you guys all come from different backgrounds because everybody gets to connect. Not only that, but even decolonizing the way that we're having these talks, right? Because we usually are in spaces where folks is so, right? Because that is part, right? You know, we start changing the way that we talk so that we can, you know, feel a part of what? The system, right? And so that when we start talking like that, it just feels so familiarized that the way that you all are talking and inspiring people and connecting people is part of the work. And it is going to go fundamentally with improvising. And I love what you said, you know, as a bomba teacher as well as teaching dance and stuff. Like, I love that. I'm a wild person. That's never left me. And so when folks come to learn about bomba, it's about guidance. When I think about Afro-Indigenous music and just practices, there's always a guide, there's always an elder, there's always, you know, there's always someone that knows, right? And just like a kid is gonna teach someone younger than them, you know, it's not about age, you know, it's about where you are in your individual process. And I feel like that's so beautiful that in your classes where you are able to center yourself, your class drove you to be wild. And I feel like, you know, driving that wildness is like looking for your liberation. And my liberation may not look the same as hers, but we know that this is the same. This is what we're trying to do. So it's like that centering piece that it makes sense because that's why experience is so important, right? We can be lost in books and everything. Experiencing and navigating that is so important because that's like that gap in between. Like, how do you feel that, you know, and you don't fish across.
You know, and I just want to say that we can talk and read about love, right? We can talk and read about love, but you don't know love until you are in love. You don't know bomba until you do bomba. You can read about it, look at all the YouTubes, all of that. So you can do jazz by just, going to the performances, but until you are in it, you do not know the practice, right? And that is so true, that it's really, yes, the books are, I'm not going to say that the books are not important, they are. We need to know our sense of history and whatnot. On the other hand, we need to also be able to experience bring our lived experience, embodied knowledge to all of the art forms.
I want to add a footnote that doesn't have anything to do with this, but when you mentioned flower, what flower? In the Mexica, Tlaxcala, and Mayan, and the whole Nahuatl culture, the symbol for music is the flower, and a specific flower. Actually, in the Nahuatl culture and mythology, you have two divinities dedicated to music and love. And their name, one of them, Xochitl, is the 5 flower. So that's...
Oh, that's beautiful.
Just the sailor.
There was one more question.
I just wanted to say, I just learned about the disconnect without the music and the dance. And I was thinking, in connection, we all have the common denominator. We have one root of that tree, different branches to the center of the tree, right? But is an improvisation. Nothing that was written to this day was what it is. It had to be improvised in order to be written.
Amen.
And so it just becomes the voices that we see today in the room as my colleague. Thank you.
We are at time.
We could exchange it all weekend. We can't help ourselves.
My reaction was that that's why conservatism want to kill improvisation, because improvisation is change.
And there's a loss of capital when we are liberated.
Right. The question that I had was all about this. So I'm gonna put it just as a final closing, as a question really for us, that is a continuation of what you started, Eilene's ending. And so I was saying, thinking about creating new love songs, taking from Tashara's, one of Tashara's piece, titled that, in times when we seem to be at a crossroads regarding our very future, times when our capacity to center humanity is being tested with unprecedented levels of violence in Palestine, Congo, Sudan, Haiti, here in the United States. Times when the viability of a sustainable future for humans and other beings on this earth is uncertain. How do we think how the arts invite us towards unity and solidarity across cultures and peoples to work together towards collective liberation? So leaving us with that, with this incredible panel and sharing of stories and
Alicia for so beautifully handling the questions. I hope that everyone here was able to learn, get like goosebumps like I did. Like it was so good. I hope that everyone online enjoyed it. This marks the end of our morning portion. So we will return at 12:30 with our workshop sessions, starting with the Bomba workshop by Eileene, La Bombera de Corazón Diaz. At 1:30 we'll have our jazz workshop by Tejada Gavin. At 2:30 we'll have Cumbia and Bulerengue workshop by La Barbela. And at 3:30 we'll have our salsa workshop by Salsa Guy Richmond. After our workshops, we will then return about 6:30 for the last session of the day, where we'll have our evening performances. Before you leave today, we did want to ask if you could fill out an evaluation form that we have in the back, as those really do help us with our funding in the future, define our future events. But thank you so much to everyone that came here for a morning session, and we hope to see everyone back when we come back. And remember to catch the recording of this session soon. Thank you.